Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Relo, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and on this wonderful Monday, we are here with Bridget Romains, founder and principal of Mobile Relocation in New Zealand. How's it going, Bridget?
Good. It's the morning here, so I'm still fresh. You guys are getting to the end of a day.
We are exhausted after another manic Monday, and you are just fresh. Well, now, what day is it in New Zealand right now?
Well, we've actually jumped ahead. We're on Tuesday already.
So you've already had your manic Monday. Now you're
Yep.
on Tuesday. Wow. Does the time zone, okay, so as I'm dealing with more people here, and if you're coming in right now, go ahead, hit that like button, send a little heart out to Bridget down in New Zealand. Go ahead and check in the comments, leave your name, your company, give a shout out, want to know what you're up to. But Bridget, as I'm doing more of these Love and Relos, and I'm talking to people all over the globe, and we're really focusing on the APAC region, right? And we've been really fortunate to have some people on. But the time zones is just killer. I mean, do you deal with that a lot in your role?
Totally. And I mean, for us, it's just natural that, you're doing calls sometimes at 1 a.m. and that you can't remember anybody's time zone. You always have to be using a time zone scheduler to figure out whether that time is realistic for the call that you're organizing. So it's a way of life. It does make it actually really hard for expats in New Zealand, though, because often when they want to connect with their family, it's either late at night or early in the morning, depending on where they are in the world. And, for some of them, it's actually quite antisocial hours, which means they can really only talk to them at the weekends if the work days are opposite. And also, we've got quite a few remote international workers at the moment, and for them, working New Zealand days means working their nights. So it's a challenge that we're just kind of used to here, but it is quite different, if you've come from North America or Europe.
I love it. And you're going to have to tell me more about a time zone scheduler, because I need some help. So if you have a tool, I want to hear about it. But first, real quick, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Go ahead and check in, hit that like button down there. Jamie Massler, hi, Ben and Bridget. Cheers from sunny and cool Mississippi. Jamie, you're sunny and cool. You know that, Jamie? Thumbs up from Janet. What's up? Robbo.
Go, Robin. Hi.
Coffee is needed. Coffee is needed. I need like 72 kinds of coffee from Macca's. Do you guys do the McDonald's? Do you guys call it Macca's too in New Zealand, or is that just an awesome?
Not so much. No, we call it McDonald's still.
Because you're proper people. Yeah. No, it's crazy.
Australia's a bigger country. They, create their own culture around things. We kind of go with the flow a bit more, perhaps. Anyway, Robin's going to comment on that.
We're going to also do a fun segment. We're going to start doing some top five. So today we have a top 5 that Bridget has put together, top 5 myths about New Zealand. And we're going to go through this, and we're going to debunk or maybe even prove some myths. So that's gonna be fun. So stay tuned for that. If you have questions for Robin about mobile relocations or anything, leave those in there. We're going to understand her story, her journey in mobility, being an entrepreneur, what her company does. We're going to get into the myths about New Zealand. We're going to answer all your questions as well, so keep those coming. New Zealand, how cool. Hi, Valerie from Deluxe Suites checking in. What's up, Val? Good to see you. Yeah, I know, New Zealand, right? I think you're our first Kiwi.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you.
Well, the honor is mine. Yeah. Jason, Express Corporate Housing checking in from Massachusetts. Welcome, Bridget. Henri Dussois from Bordeaux. Elena, hey, Bridget and Ben checking in from Maryland. What's up, Elena? Jack, hi, Bridget and Ben. What's up, Jack? Good to see you. Miriam, greetings from Hart, Netherlands. This is great. Okay. Leave them leave those comments in there. We're going to get to all of them. First, I want to understand before we get to the top 5 myths, because I'm really looking forward to this. But I want to understand about you, Bridget. Tell me about your story. How did you get into global mobility?
I got into global mobility with my sort of feet jumping into it on the ground, really. I left university and I was lucky enough to be recruited to the New Zealand Diplomatic Service. So I worked for the Equivalent of State Department. in the US. And so within 2 years, I was about 22, I was sent off on my first posting as the number 2 in the New Zealand High Commission in New Delhi. So I arrived there by myself. My partner sort of turned up a bit later, had some things to do in New Zealand first. Spent 2.5 years there with really, relocation support didn't exist. We were just told to go to work and do it. And, here's a shipper, you can send some things over, and that's about it. I came back to New Zealand, and then I got married to my partner. So the next posting we went on was in Singapore. So we went as a dual career couple at that stage, again with sort of limited support because it didn't exist in the public service in those days. While I was in Singapore, I had 2 children and started a freelance writing business. So then I became an international entrepreneur, or an entrepreneur in a different country, I guess. And at that stage, I stopped working for the Foreign Service, obviously. So I became more of a trailing spouse, and then repatriated back to New Zealand to give birth to a 3rd child in a medical system where I had no idea what it was like to give birth to children, even though it was my own country.
Did you experience to some degree a culture shock coming back to your home country?
Very much so. I was just talking to Janet before, when you come back to New Zealand, it's our home, we love it, but it's very far from the rest of the world. I'd been used to living in big cosmopolitan cities and having friends of all nationalities and traveling all the time and that stimulation. So it was really hard to come back, even though my family and friends were wonderful, and that was the reason we came home. I missed that. And my friends now joke to me that I started mobile relocation really so I could hang out with other expats and people in the global mobility industry. So I could be back in that, kind of, just really interesting and interested people sort of zone, and very international. So I did a few other things in New Zealand when I first came back, did a bit more government policy work, and then had the opportunity to work for a sort of a relocation company, worked for them for a while. And then I thought, there's actually a better and a different way of doing this that I can bring together from my relocation, sort of working as a consultant, with my personal experience and my experience of large organisations and corporates. So that's where we launched mobile relocation.
So you actually had experience as an expat. You had large corporation experience. So you brought maybe a degree of professionalism and kind of acumen to the table. And you said, I can do this better. I love that moment. I love that story where the entrepreneur says, you know what, I can do this better, and they just kind of go do it. What was that moment for you? Do you remember that moment in your journey where you just said, screw it, I can do it better?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I did. And that's very kind of you to say those things, Ben, because at the time it was actually a terrifying moment, because I thought, I knew in my mind I could do it better, but then the execution of it, I'd never run a business of this scale before. I did quite a lot of planning about what I could do myself and what just wasn't me. One of those was the finances. So as soon as I had some cash flow, I bought an accountant. And the other part of it too was bringing together an amazing team to help me execute the vision. And, we have 17 advisors now who work throughout New Zealand who are incredible. They just share the values and the heart of the business and the commitment to what we're trying to achieve with our corporate clients. And that's, I would say, those two things, that sort of deciding what you can do and what you can't do, and getting an amazing team of people around you, has enabled me to get through the fear and just do it.
And we're going to talk about mobile relocation and what you just do. But before we get into that, because I was literally just on the phone with a guy, literally before I got on with you now, who said, Ben, I want to tell my boss to go screw himself. I want to go start my own thing. Am I crazy? And I said, no, you're not crazy. You should do it. What advice do you have to people who are considering entrepreneurship? I mean, is it a blanket, just do it, or is there some other kind of nuance to it?
I think you need to have a really clear vision of what you want to achieve. And that's not necessarily in a money, well, I think it's probably personal, but for me, it's not necessarily a money sense, but it's a very clear vision of how we want to serve our customers and how we want to serve assignees, and just keep coming back to that, because people respond to that sort of value thing and what you're trying to achieve, and they get caught up in passion for it as well. Yeah, I think that would probably be my main piece of advice. From that, you have to do it because you've got to figure it out as you go. You don't have all the logistical answers to exactly what you're going to do at the beginning.
I love what you say there, though. It's have that mission and know where you're going to be adding value. Know what you're going to be doing that's going to be valuable, and focus on that. I think a lot of entrepreneurs might start thinking about the money they're going to make, or saying, hey, I want to be able to make X amount of dollars. How do I back into that? Instead of saying, I think I have a better way to do something and create value that way, and thinking of how to monetize that thing. And I think that's what's interesting about what you did. And I think that mission, and having that mission, that passion from the beginning, is probably what's got you to the point where you have 17 folks now, doing this with you. And let's talk about what you actually do at Mobile Relocation. Would you share that with us? What is Mobile Relocation?
Mobile relocation is a bit of a hybrid, really. In New Zealand, we have quite an unusual relocation market because we have huge skill shortages throughout our economy here. So we are bringing in lots of international talent. Some of those people come on assignment, for 3 to 4 years working for a multinational. That's some of our big clients. Like Heineken, for example, we run their global mobility program. And then there are also a lot of people who want to migrate to New Zealand. So they come here to fill roles on a more permanent basis. And we do a lot of work for KPMG and Deloitte in that space, where people are actually moving here permanently, but they're coming to fill skill shortages. And we also have private clients, again, high net worth individuals who want to come to New Zealand and need to reset their lives here. So we're serving those three sort of groups of customers through corporates and private channels. And what we do is resettlement planning and delivery for them. So when they're coming to New Zealand, they need to have everything coordinated for them, from shipping to immigration to tax. We don't do that in-house, but we have trusted partners who do that. What we do deliver is really personalised resettlement planning and services through our advisors. So every person who's coming is allocated their own resettlement advisor, who is their trusted person. When you move to a new country, you don't know anybody. You don't know who to trust. You don't know who to ask questions to. You feel dumb. And our advisor is your person who you can build that trust relationship with, who'll coordinate the move. And then when you get here, they do the normal sort of, we're not normal because we do it much differently and in a more personalised way, but help people find houses and schools and that sort of face-to-face personalised service as well.
Sure.
So end to end for corporates and also for private individuals.
So would you classify yourself or characterize yourself as an RMC, a relocation management company?
We're a bit of both, actually. We do RMC work. We also do DSP work. So it depends very much what our clients need. And, our corporate clients, we actually work out tailored relocation programs for most of our corporates, depending on what they want, and the same with private clients. So we're able to do it all. And I think my kind of personal and professional experience of relocation and connections and contacts and network enables us to do that, quite effectively. We're not a big organisation. We're not an RMC that's competing with, one of the major world providers by any sense, but we do what we do in our niche in New Zealand.
We've got some great comments coming in here, so keep those coming. Keep those questions coming. Jack, I see those great questions there. Valerie too. Henri, love to hear from you. Francine as well. One last question before we go into the comments and the questions. Do you partner with other RMCs who need representation in New Zealand?
Yeah, we do that. Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I always like to know how people can kind of work together and partner. Let's see here. We got some fantastic comments coming in here. I see Elena and Jason, Miriam. Oh, Miriam's always got something to say. Love a question there, Miriam. Let's see. Shouting out Jack, Michael James. Hey, you too. Michael was sweet. America checking in from California. Speaking of which, do you do the temp housing as well, corporate housing down there?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, our job is to do whatever's needed to get that person here and happy and working.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, we just interviewed a nanny for a family who's moving from the US, because it's really important. They're both going to be remote working. They've got to have a nanny. That's part of getting set up for work.
Oh, I love it.
Doing that the other day.
Francine says, hi, Ben, Bridget, and Janet checking in from VIP Corporate Housing. Huge fan of Keith Urban. Love New Zealand.
New Zealand, we joke we have 2 degrees of separation from everybody rather than 6 because it's such a small country, but I don't know Keith Urban. Sorry about that. I've got to be really honest.
But you know somebody that knows Keith Urban.
Oh, I probably do. Yeah, I probably do.
That's so funny. Val says, what is the one thing that makes, first question here. Okay. Val says, what is the one thing that makes relocating to and from New Zealand more challenging than other countries?
I'm going to ask a question back and then I'll answer it. Can you think of a country that's further from the Northern Hemisphere than New Zealand, apart from Antarctica? And the answer to that is no. So people get down here and they realize it's going to take me, almost a full day to fly home. The time difference that I mentioned earlier, at the moment, again, another thing with clients at the moment, the iPhone 12 Pro is out of stock in New Zealand.
What?
Yeah, just, we have the reputation as being a little paradise, but the reason we're a little paradise that's a bit more is because we're a bit more remote, and that has some kind of downsides and challenges to it and lifestyle differences, which people tend to underestimate, because when you look from the outside, we're a very kind of, westernized society, and culture doesn't look that different. But I think people sometimes underestimate what the differences are. Shipping takes, at the moment, it's just taking forever to get to New Zealand, months. So, when people move here, they're without their personal possessions for quite a long time.
Yeah, Janet says custom formalities for importing household goods is pretty challenging, I believe.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point.
Do you deal with any of that?
Well, yeah, we have people who are qualified and more experienced than me to deal with that. But yes, because, we're an agricultural country, we have to have very strict quarantine controls. And that even comes down to, if you're shipping wooden things in or hiking boots, we have to have no dirt on them. It has to be fumigated and clean because we can't afford to introduce pests into our agricultural environment here.
Wow. Interesting. That's so fascinating. Let me understand the culture too. I'm going to say that we got some questions coming in, so I'm going to ask my culture question. Henri says it's funny how sales and entrepreneurship are alike. Henri, I'd like to hear more about that, but before I do, from Henri, Bridget, what do you think about this? Is sales and entrepreneurship two sides of the same coin, or how do they differ? What are your thoughts?
To be honest with you, I find sales more difficult than entrepreneurship, but you can't be a successful entrepreneur without selling things. So I guess we all have our strengths and weaknesses within the entrepreneurship field. And you need to play to your strengths and then figure out how to get other people to help you or to learn to do the parts which are perhaps not quite so strong.
So do you fancy yourself more of an operator than a sales?
No, well, I suppose also, you're challenging me here because I think straight away sales, and I define sales in a way that I'm uncomfortable with. But where we are successful with sales is where we have amazing partnerships with our clients. And as you mentioned earlier, we're adding value. So I guess, that's that kind of sales I love. But the thought of just turning up and trying to, sell something to somebody is
knock, buy something. Here you go. Please.
Yeah.
Door slams in your face. No, I think everybody's uncomfortable with that notion of sales. And I feel like sales has become a dirty word, but at the end of the day, if you think about every single thing that we own was sold to us. And if we think about it that way, that everything that we love and enjoy and cherish, materially, was at one point sold to us. And I think that if you think about it that way, it imbues a little bit more of maybe a touch more altruism in the process.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you're working in partnership with people, you're making them and their business better, and they're in partnership with you doing the same for you. And then it's just not selling; it's just working together and creating great things.
Yeah, no, and that's what I would like to be associated. That's how I'd like to see sales associated more in the future. Jack says, Jack, I love Jack, man. Thanks for tuning in, Jack. Always with a good question here. Jack says, have you found starting your own business is more challenging than you expected, or pretty much what you expected?
Bit of both, actually. I had sort of started a freelance writing business before. It was much smaller scale. I think at the beginning it was more scary, as I didn't find COVID challenging at all from a business point of view, although we've had huge hits, because it was exciting. And I think that's partly because I've been an expat before, and all the change and, culture change differences. And, I'd experienced lots of things similar to this before. And it also was amazing because we really got alongside our corporate clients, and we started doing a lot of work in the wellbeing space.
I'm so sorry, Bridget. I want to cut you off here, and I want to go back to something you said, because now I got to interject and ask you this question. Yeah. You said COVID wasn't that challenging because of all the things you had been through before.
Yeah.
What the hell have you been through that prepares you for COVID?
But
seriously though,
I wrote a blog for a really amazing group, Next Gen GM, which is based in the UK, of young global mobility people. And I'm not young, but they let me hang out with them, about moving to COVID land, because it was like moving to another country when COVID, because what happened in New Zealand is we found out, I think on the Monday, we were being locked down on the Thursday. So it was like someone saying to me, and this has happened to me in the past before, get on a plane and go to this country, for a business trip or to move. It's got to be fast. And suddenly everything that was normal had changed. We suddenly had queues at our supermarket. We suddenly couldn't go out anywhere. To start with, our lockdown was so strict that we couldn't even do online ordering apart from groceries. So all of our lifestyle was completely disrupted, just like when you move to a different country. We couldn't see our family and friends apart from the ones we were living with. So for me, that wasn't really that scary. I'd done that before.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Comparing going into COVID land, like going to another country where all of a sudden now your friends and family are, unavailable to you, and all of your amenities have been curtailed and changed and limited in a way like you might feel if you went to another country. That is a fascinating comparison.
Yeah, that's what it felt like for me.
Yeah. So anyway, but so you were saying though how that's prepared you, for what's going on now, and I kind of interrupted you before, but I had to hear that, and I'm so glad I did. But how is that? So back to Jack's question, have you found starting your own business more challenging than you expected, or pretty much as you expected? And you said both.
I expected it to be challenging, and it has been. Probably things didn't happen as fast as I would have liked, but then when you read about other entrepreneurs, just about every entrepreneur says that, because you have the vision and you just can't understand why other people aren't adopting it quite as quickly as you are. And I realized the difference between the vision and where you are now is relationships. People need to trust you, trust your vision, particularly with something that's new. And you need to work along that process together. And then once you get going together, then it's amazing, because they're on the journey with you. That's the most exciting part.
Yeah, and isn't that always like the saying, right? I'm an overnight celebrity, 10 years in the making, right?
Yeah.
It's like people see overnight, oh, wow, you're such a success story. How'd you do it? Well, for 10 years, I languished and nobody understood what I was doing. And then finally somebody bought into it. And yeah, that's awesome. Let's see here. We got some other comments and questions coming in. Thank you, Jack, for that. Jamie says, I agree. Having a short-term and long-term plan with tangible metrics in place is key to reaching a clear, thought-out vision. How do you handle strategic plan? I'm always interested to hear how leaders, run their business, but how do you handle short-term and long-term planning?
When we started the business, we had a very tight plan, as I am quite a planner, but I'm also a believer in, stepping away from that plan when you need to. And in fact, many of the key elements of the initial plan are still there, but they've sort of developed, and some parts have obviously been more fruitful than others. Then when COVID came along, we had to completely turn our plan upside down. That didn't bother me. So, it's a mixture of both to me.
I find it so interesting that you're a planner, but you're also very comfortable with ambiguity and change. And I find that usually planners don't really feel comfortable tossing out that plan that they've been working on for weeks and months, because something changed. And I think that that resilience and adaptability is also probably a reason that you've been successful. Would you agree, or am I wrong?
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, if I look back on my life, I am probably more of the planner, but that expat experience, which I really, really was very motivated to do that, I wanted to live internationally, made me realize I lived in India. There's no way I was going to change, anything about the way India worked to make my life easier and to make my plans come true. I had to go with the flow and do what I wanted to do to a certain degree, but also, accommodate the environment around me. So that was a huge learning for me, at a relatively early age, which I think was borne out in later experiences in my life as being, the way that I was going to be able to cope with unplanned situations.
I love it. This is fascinating. I love just asking you questions out of my own personal curiosity. So forgive me. Steve Miser checking in, household goods driver here in the States. What's up, Steve? Always good to have you, buddy. Ray, good afternoon from Vancouver, British Columbia. Tim Quirk, hello all from Western New York. Henri, when people meet entrepreneurs, they get energized. When they meet salespeople, they get tense. Interesting. That's funny. That's so funny. I kind of agree. Eric Masadi, hi, Ben and Bridget, watching from sunny Florida. What's up, Eric? Sounds good. It sounds like, Bridget, your firm is really making an impact with making people comfortable, happy, and successful despite the challenges. What secrets can you share with us to help us be more impactful?
Two things, really. One is, I think, and I mentioned this earlier, I'll say it again, the quality of the people who deliver the services and work in the organisation. I mean, I honestly would trust any of them with my life. I know them personally. They're as committed as I am to the well-being of the people we work with. So that has huge impact when that sort of sense of your personal values is shared by the people who work with you. That's absolutely major. And then the other thing, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more later, is, again, that working with your clients. I mean, I actually really like the HR people we partner with, and I want their careers to be successful, and I want their businesses people to be happy. So we're all in the game together. So I want to think that we're having an impact on their business in a positive way, not just, I hate just being considered as a service provider. I find that professionally kind of irritating, and I just don't think we can do our best for them unless we work in partnership with them.
How do you achieve that kind of equitable partnership? This is something that all service partners struggle with, some more so than others, right? But you always want to have that dream relationship where you can talk to one another and share, but sometimes it's very much a one-way street relationship.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I've seen that develop with some of our long-standing clients, where at the beginning, that it's a traditional supplier relationship, and I find that really unsatisfying. But over time, I don't know, we go beyond what they've asked us to do. We're organised, and we try to make their lives as easy as we can. Even little things. During COVID, we were doing these wellbeing seminars, and for delivery to their staff. So we wrote all the emails that they needed to send out to their staff, so they didn't have to do that, because the HR people would just run off their feet. So anything we can do to kind of help them make their lives easier, and what you're really doing through all of that, although it's not my, it's kind of mercenary goal to do it, but you're building trust. They're trusting you, that you're going to be there to help them when they need it.
Well, and I think you're also going out of your way to take care of them.
Yeah.
Which I think also builds another kind of trust, right? Where I can rely on this person to help me and make my life easier. And then I think when you demonstrate a willingness to make other people's lives easier and to give even things that weren't asked of you, I think you find that people come to you more willingly to ask for your help with problems, which again, going back to what we're in the business of solving people's problems, right? And so we need them to ask us first, because then there's people like Jack out here who just don't want us creepy salespeople calling them all the time. Jack says in the U.S. there's a saturated market of mobility suppliers. What is? I got so many jokes right now, Jack. What is competition like in New Zealand in your business mobility area?
Oh, it's fierce, and we're winning it. No.
Great answer. That is spectacular. It's fierce, and we're winning. I love it.
No. I'll tell you the truth. It's weird here. It's very small. We've got 5 million people. We've got high levels of immigration. We've got skill shortages. So there are a lot of people coming into the country. I guess the advantage for us in the market is that for a lot of global corporates, they've signed up with a big RMC, and, most of their moves, say, are in North America or somewhere like that. So there's a lot of care and attention paid in that market. Down here, they might do a few moves a year, not big number. They've got the budget's pretty small. New Zealand seems pretty easy, and I'm going to be a bit controversial here and say I don't think that those global RMCs are well serving the corporate offices of their clients here in New Zealand. So where we come in as a local alternative, I mean, we're not, I'm not going to be moving people all around the world and setting them up in, South Africa and all that. I'm only in New Zealand. So some of the RMCs have seen that we can provide a superior service in New Zealand to do that. And some of the global corporates actually, the New Zealand operations say, look, we don't want to take the global contract anymore. We're going to deal with mobile in New Zealand to provide that service. So yeah, that's a kind of roundabout answer, because we're never going to have, we don't have a saturation of much of anything in New Zealand, to be honest with you, and that sometimes lack of competition can be a bad thing too.
Talk about that for a moment. What do you mean by that? Because I think all of us who are in fierce competition and sometimes winning, I would always love to see a little less competition out there. So what do you mean by too much competition or too little competition? Oh,
sorry, I wasn't actually referring to global mobility. I was meaning in New Zealand we have two major supermarket groups, and the government's just instituted an inquiry into supermarket pricing because we pay far too much for our food here in New Zealand. That's unrelated to global mobility.
Well, no, but it is and it isn't, right? Because I look at other regions, right? And I look at Latin America, right? So we have all these friends in Brazil and Latin America. And global mobility is not as mature of an industry down there. It hasn't been going on as long, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot less infrastructure. There's somewhat less thought leadership, perhaps, but a lot less, maybe corporate housing options or movers are pretty good, but maybe the regulations are not conducive. The global mobility hasn't laid the groundwork quite as much as it has maybe in the United States or in Europe, let's say, right, where it's a lot more mature, and so, I think that's one of the interesting things, and I think that's one of the things where less competition can be a bad thing because, when you look at, let's use Latin America, many of the global mobility decisions for Latin America are made outside of Latin America. And I think the rationale has been, the rationale may have been that that's where the headquarters was, so they make it a headquarters level, but that's not true for, let's say the United States. An international company may still allow the United States HR business partners to make mobility decisions in the United States. And I think that the reason is because the infrastructure is there. They trust that the HR business partner has the resources and the tools and the supply chain, in order to make those decisions. And I wonder if in other regions where global mobility is not as mature, that they don't maybe trust the HR business partners in that area to make those decisions. Now, could be, I could be the controversial one at this point, right? But I mean, I do wonder about that, though. But you feel like there's an equilibrium, though. You feel like there's the right amount of suppliers for the global mobility activity that's going on in New Zealand. Is that right?
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, the thing is that you're never going to have a large number of suppliers in the same category in New Zealand, and that is a bit of a challenge because there's not enough people coming in to be doing that. I'm interested in your comment because what we find with some of our international clients or global corporates, they actually feel that, okay, the policies might be set internationally, but the delivery needs to be localized to local conditions. And that's where they step aside and they can work directly with us sometimes.
Yeah.
Or we work within the framework of a large RMC, but we kind of just suss things out with the local office and, work within the policy and do what needs to be done.
Yes, I love it. Makes sense. Speaking of loving things, Francine says, OMG, that quote was so money, Bridget. I didn't get a chance to write it down. It was something like, quote, the difference between where you are and where you're going is defined by your relationships. Did I get that right? She says.
Yeah, I think so. Because, you can't achieve things by yourself, whether it's your team and your business or your clients. You just can't do it without those relationships, to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like your network is your net worth. I think that, that, yeah, the relationships are so key. How have you been building and maintaining those relationships in a COVID world, Bridget?
Through just being there for our clients, honestly. You know, we recognized when they were, you know, the beginning of COVID in New Zealand, everybody was running around madly because we had people stuck everywhere, and it was just, you know, the same as everywhere. And we realized that what the issue, the issue we could help with was the well-being of those expats stuck in New Zealand, and the ones who are, a lot of them still stuck offshore because our borders are pretty closed. And that our clients, because they work with us anyway, they're the kinds of organizations who actually really care about the employee experience and psychological safety and, you know, all those things. So we said to them, look, you know, we know you guys are really flat out with this stuff, but we're a bit concerned about how you people are going to be coping. Here's some things that we think would be a really good idea to do. So they said, yeah, that's great. Can you do that? We'll write the emails. Well, we have an expat wellbeing, she's a psychologist who's based in France who we work with. So we set up some workshops and, you know, organized all of that for them. So we kind of maintained those relationships through doing stuff alongside them and giving them ideas, and we could take care of that and blah, blah, blah. So tell me
about this expat psychologist though. I've not heard this before.
Oh, Dr. Sonia Jaeger, she's wonderful. Actually, I should put her on my list of people for you to interview. Sure. She's a global nomad. So she doesn't live anywhere, although she's had to live, you know, more permanently in a lot of places recently. And I met her at the FIGT, Families in Global Transition Conference in Bangkok, year before last. Can't remember when we were last allowed to travel. And so she is a psychologist. She has a PhD, Dr. Sonia Jaeger, and as she travels and lives internationally, she does all of her work online, of course, remotely, and all of her clients are expats. That's what she specializes in. So she has this global view of how expats are feeling, what their issues are, you know, as a psychologist. So she's absolutely incredible. And I met her at a conference in Bangkok, and then she ended up coming to New Zealand. So for Mental Health Awareness Week, last year, we had her do seminars with a whole lot of clients and some organisations who weren't our clients to just take the lid off some of the expat mental health issues, which are just never talked about. And this has come from my personal experience too. You know, I faced some depression when I was in Singapore at one stage, but I had no idea about. There's a whole lot of research around the challenges expats face and how common it is. And I think knowledge is power with this. So, sorry, I'm raving on a bit here. It's one of my...
No, but I love it. Can somebody, can you guys watching this right now? See a bunch of people on LinkedIn, Facebook, hit that like button, throw a little heart out there to Bridget. Can somebody tag, was it Dr. Sonia Jaeger? Was that her name? Jaeger, like Jägermeister. No, we got this. Don't worry about it. Somebody tag Dr. Sonia Jaeger in there so we can follow up. I appreciate you doing that if you're watching. Also, you mentioned the Families in Global Transition Conference. Fidget, it sounds like. That's fantastic. Can you tag? Put the link in there too. If you're watching this right now, put the link in there in the comments as well, because I'm fascinated by anytime there's. I'm learning so much about global mobility. I thought when I started this thing, hey, I know a lot of stuff. I know a lot of people, and I'm like learning stuff like every single day. I'm learning like a phenomenal amount. It makes me feel so dumb and yet so smart at the same time. So thank you for that. I appreciate it, Bridget.
I must say that's one of the things I like about mobility, because the people are, as I said before, interested and interesting, and you can never get to the end of knowing everything because there's so many permutations. I mean, international remote working, there was a little bit of a thing. Now it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And we can learn about that, you know.
Haysha, thank you so much for putting that in there. I appreciate you putting Sonia's contact there on LinkedIn. There we go. And then, awesome, Haysha. Appreciate that. We are going to get, look at Jackie coming in too. Appreciate you, Jackie. I love it when we can just crowdsource things and they can just kind of go into Google and figure it out, right? It's like, I appreciate y'all so much making this show so great. Keep up the comments there. Throw a little LinkedIn. Look at you people are doing so phenomenal. We got one more question from Henri, and then we're going to get into the top 5 myths about New Zealand, because I love myths. I love busting myths. Henri says, despite competition, what would you say are New Zealand's specific challenges in your line of work, like suppliers, layout, infrastructure constraints, client requests, even?
Infrastructure constraints, definitely. You asked about temporary accommodation before. Apartment, short-term stay apartments, serviced apartments, not very good, not very many. Sometimes we're having to work with Airbnb, which families actually prefer anyway, but then that comes up against corporate policy. Sometimes I think there's a lot of
Duty of care, yeah.
In New Zealand, because we don't, and when I say infrastructure, it's not just the physical infrastructure. There isn't an expat infrastructure. We don't have international schools. We don't have international clubs. So you really have to figure out for each individual and each family how you fit into that New Zealand system, what's going to work best for you. If your kids are going to be going back after 3 years, how do they transition into the education system, place you've come from, so that sort of thing. Client requests, again, there's that client request, that's always it's always an issue, and that's problem solving and working through expectation. Supplier layout is probably not very transparent. I mean, we know what the supplier layout is, but from the outside, again, because it's quite a small market, it's probably not super transparent like it would be, in the US. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
I don't know. Henri, how did she do?
Yeah.
We're going to assume that did. And I want to get to my favorite part anyway, because my show, so I'm going to do what I want. I want to do top 5 myths about New Zealand. Okay, so Janet, can you cue these up here? Super producer Janet in the background there. Top 5 myths about New Zealand. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate you back there. That's my rock right there, Janet. Okay, top 5 myths about New Zealand. So you made up some myths here. Let me just, on a scale of 1 to 10, I just want you to rate the rest of the world's understanding, okay? How far off are we, generally speaking, scale of 1 to 10?
I wouldn't say, I think most of the world is really positive about New Zealand, and views it, as a really nice place. And so it's not so much, it may be off in that reality meeting perception area rather than being off about being wrong, if that makes sense.
All right, let's get into number 1.
Okay.
What's number 1? We live in hobbit houses. Tell me about this. What do you mean?
I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan, but the rest of the world is. And we have a whole tourism industry designed around Lord of the Ring fandom and people coming to New Zealand and going around the different sites where the movies were set. You can go down to Hamilton, which is just south of Auckland, and you can they've recreated the set there, so you can go and be in a hobbit house. So I think there are some people who are really into Lord of the Rings who come here and expect the whole place to kind of be like this magical kingdom. But we are a little bit more advanced and developed than that. Although you can certainly do your fan thing while you're here too.
So, okay. So in every joke or myth, maybe there's a bit of truth, right? So it sounds like I can go stay in a hobbit house though.
Well, you can visit one, and you can stay one. You can go and do a day tour of the whole Hobbit set and go into a hobbit house. Maybe there's probably some clever accommodation provider who can get you to stay in one. I don't know.
I mean, that sounds like a temp housing opportunity. Yeah.
That's right. For a super fan. Yeah, good point.
Super fan.
Yeah.
I mean, just another offering perhaps at mobile.
That's why we like that.
I was just hosting an Alta Vita corporate housing symposium last week, and they had an award ceremony. I think it was the Thursday session or whatever. There was an award ceremony, and it was for best designed corporate accommodation. And some company and I think it was a Swedish hospitality or something won for some amazing villa. But I think if we do this, if we pull this off, like historically accurate, like boom, I think we could. I don't know. We give them a run. That's all I'm saying.
We'll get an award next year.
Yeah, for sure. People are loving this right now. Henri here, Hobbit Relo. Here we go. See, I told you guys we're gonna have some fun today. Haysha, we have Hobbit houses in the USA too. Tell me more, Haysha, about these Hobbit houses.
I didn't know that.
Jamie Master, I want to go to Mordor. Oh, this is fabulous. This is excellent. This is excellent. Oh, and Henri said, yes, you did answer his question. Okay, Janet, number 2. What's number 2, Bridget? Bridget, what I'm gonna say them, and you're gonna say the thing, and then we're gonna go on to talk about it. What's number 2, Bridget?
There are more people than sheep.
Well, I always heard that this is true. I heard that, like, that's a trivia question that I feel like we all grew up, doing Trivial Pursuit, and New Zealand was the country with more sheep than people. Is this not true?
Well, that's true, but then maybe I wrote it down incorrectly when I was typing it to you. Anyway,
all right.
My 16-year-old, before he went off to his exam this morning, because he's down, said, quickly, look up, tell me how many sheep there are in New Zealand at the moment. So there are now 30 million sheep in New Zealand and 5 million people. So each of us has 6 sheep.
Okay. So yes, there are more sheep than people. So the myth is that there are more people than sheep, which would be, I hate to say normal because that's wrong, but everywhere else, but not in New Zealand. In New Zealand, there are more sheep than people. And you said every one of us has 6 sheep. You don't actually, like, lay people don't keep sheep, right? This is still.
We let farmers have lots more sheep because they like them.
Ah, that's funny. This is great. People are commenting there are more hobbits than sheep. Francine's doing a sheep shout out. This is fabulous. Okay. All right, Janet, number 3. What's number 3?
New Zealand is part of Australia.
Now, I knew better than this. I know that New Zealand, because I also have a good friend, Tony Valentine. Do you know Tony Valentine, by the way?
I'm sure I know somebody who knows him.
Keith Urban knows Tony Valentine.
I'm obviously moving in the wrong circles.
No, but I knew better because every time me and Tony go out drinking, he somehow incorporates into the conversation that New Zealand is not part of Australia and is willing to fight anybody that feels otherwise. But why do people make this mistake often?
Well, actually, New Zealand did used to be part of Australia back in the 1800s, and then we kind of moved ourselves off. But
was it attached at one point?
Well, it probably was, actually, but that would be millions of years ago. Then we were attached to the US probably at one point too, but anyway, that was an ancient history. And I think it's just because people look down to the bottom of the world. There's not much. Australia's kind of bigger, and we sort of sit down below. And so once you get down this way, it all kind of melds into the same sort of thing.
All that down there. It's all that down under.
Our accents are a bit similar, although we think they're quite different. So.
Now, it
does sometimes come out with people.
Is New Zealand part of the Oceania?
You just dipped out there for a minute. I didn't quite hear what you said.
Is New Zealand part of the oceanic? I don't even want to call it a continent. I don't know if that's appropriate or not. Is it part of that group?
There's 2, I don't know, Oceania is kind of really broad. I suppose there's 2 areas we define ourselves. One would be Australasia, which is Australia and New Zealand, a broader grouping, and then more commonly the Asia Pacific, very close economic, political and cultural ties. Yes, Zealandia, that's true. Very close political, economic and cultural ties to Southeast Asia and South Asia.
So what is this Australasia concept?
That's Australia and New Zealand.
Australia and New Zealand. So when you put them together, even though they're not together, they call it Australasia.
Yeah, Australasia.
Okay, this is good. I'm learning something. Haitia's entertained. We're on to something here. Okay, fantastic. And Henri, let's stay keeping us honest, okay, Henri? Keep those Wikipedia links coming. All right, Janet, number 4.
Small relocation companies can't partner directly with major international corporations. I think I've already debunked that one, haven't I?
Well, debunk some more, because I think that there's some folks watching this right now that would identify with your situation on this, right?
Yeah.
I know going in and selling to large corporations that we call it the dots on the map problem, right? Is if you're a smaller provider, you go in and all of a sudden the most important slide in your presentation becomes the map with all the dots on it. And people just can't seem to get the map out of their head with all the dots, and so tell me a little bit more about your experience with this, because I think it's pertinent.
Yeah, well, I think it's not going to work for every business. For some businesses, you know, the logistical piece and the dots on the map is the most important thing, you know, ticking all those boxes. For other businesses which are prepared to devolve a bit more responsibility, and I'm talking of New Zealand in this case, to their New Zealand office, and are more cognizant perhaps of, you know, the challenges that are being faced here, the well-being of their staff, trust perhaps within the organisation. Perhaps it's more devolved structure, and they will trust their local operation to partner with, you know, a local provider to provide those services within a wider policy framework. You know, because when you look at our major relationships, you know, we work with the major New Zealand government organisations, Deloitte, KPMG, Heineken I mentioned earlier. I mean, they're huge corporates, and I'm sure, you know, the head office in Amsterdam doesn't actually know or isn't particularly interested in what we're doing, apart from saying that services are being provided within the broader, you know, global mobility HR framework. But the people in New Zealand in Heineken DB are very interested in how the well-being of their staff and how they're being looked after. So the corporate office in that case is happy to let the local office figure out how to solve that problem.
So with a company like Heineken, because you mentioned them before, and it's beer, and it's almost 5 o'clock here. So let's stay on this for just a moment. So you mentioned you managed the relocations for Heineken. Is that within New Zealand, or relocations in the region, or relocations globally? How do you work with a company like Heineken?
Yeah, well, as I said before, I mean, we don't pretend to be an international relocation company. We manage their global mobility program in New Zealand. So it's not a local provider thing, but it's more than a DSP, because we're not working through a relocation management company. We're working directly with the client. And I find that relationship far more satisfying for both of us, I think.
And so these are relocations that may originate outside of New Zealand, of people that are coming to New Zealand. Is that correct? Okay.
That's right.
I see. Yeah. I see. Interesting. Yeah, it always perplexed me, you know, does the in the States we say, you know, a football analogy, the kicking team or the receiving team, who manages, you know, the relocations. But when a lot of them are new hires, obviously it's got to be the receiving team. But do you manage now, if somebody were to go from Heineken in New Zealand to let's say to the United States, would you handle that relocation, or would the US based?
Yeah, that's right. The receiver handles
the
it.
receiver.
The other thing about Heineken too, and I think this is definitely a trend in relocation that I'm seeing, is sort of tailored programs, because one of the reasons why we came on board there was they'd set up an Asia Pacific graduate program. So their graduates all through the APAC region spend 6 months in different offices. So we set up a really unique program for that, where they moved into a shared house together, because these young people were coming to New Zealand feeling very socially isolated. You know, they're quite unhappy and lonely living in the service department, of which they're not very many and they're not very nice in New Zealand. So we set up a whole program of orientation and support for them, and this group housing thing, because the sharing a house with other young people is a huge part of, you know, your 20s when you live in New Zealand. So, and they just absolutely love it, and the business loves it too, because it's giving them a real New Zealand experience. So they leave New Zealand, you know, and they go out as ambassadors for DB New Zealand, which is the Heineken subsidiary here. So it's being able to do that kind of local, flexible, cost effective, because it was cheaper than putting them into service departments at the end of the day. You know, and I don't highlight again, Amsterdam head office could never have overseen that was required and delivered it from Amsterdam. That had to be something that was worked out between us and the local team here.
That's such a great little case study. I love stories. I think stories are, you know, people talk about data. I think stories and anecdotes are actually underutilized. And Rob Dog says, great that Heineken does that for short-term assignees too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to you mentioned that's a uniquely New Zealand experience. And before we get to the fifth myth, is that true that young people live in large houses together in New Zealand when they're in their, you know, when they're in their early 20s? Is this after university or?
Yeah, and during university too. Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes it can be an apartment. I think at one stage we had 3, and then we actually had a house of 5. So, you know, it sort of just depends. But
I didn't. Wow, that's interesting. See, I didn't realize that. All right, cool. Let's get to the fifth question, the fifth myth, if you will.
Oh, yeah. As New Zealand has held a senior role in the Trump White House for the past 4 years. I don't know. Should we take a vote on this?
All right, is this true or false? Is this true or false? Let's give 15 seconds. We're gonna let people answer this. Is this true or false that a New Zealander has held a senior role in the Trump White House for the last 4 years? Just throw a true or a false in the comments there. And also, if once you did, also hit that like button too. Awesome, Janet, look at you on top of things, throwing a little true or false in there at the end. Hey, all right, so let's throw that in there. Let's get at least one answer. I'm looking at you, Robin. Robin says true. Henri, what do you think? Haisha, Francine, Jack, anybody out there? Is there anybody out there? All right. Henri has a clarifying question. He wants to know, was it a hobbit? No, Henri, it wasn't a hobbit. Francine says true. You know why everybody took a minute? Because everybody was Googling it. That's
okay. All right. Okay. It's true. His name's Chris Liddell, and he was Deputy Chief of Staff. But the reason why I put this question in there is, and Robin might laugh when I say this, New Zealanders and Australians are everywhere in the world. You know, we're almost equivalent to the Irish diaspora. And there are 5 million people in, absolutely, Hesha. There are 5 million people who live in New Zealand and 1 million New Zealanders who are living and working in other parts of the world. So, you know, they're everywhere.
Wow, that's great. Henri, stop, man. You know, you keep messing around. People aren't going to want to come on the show anymore if you keep starting. An orc, he says. No, not an orc, Henri, you silly. Anyway, no, that's fascinating. In New Zealand, how does a New Zealander? I mean, how does he even wind up in there? I mean, do you know anything about his story?
Yeah, he headed a couple of major corporations in New Zealand and then moved to the US. Now, I'm thinking maybe it wasn't GM, but he was very senior in a couple of big US corporations, and then obviously got involved with the Republican Party and entered the Trump White House.
And there you have it. Yeah. That's awesome. Fantastic. Thanks for playing that little game. Let me know if you're watching this right now. Do you want to see more of those top 5 things? I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's cool, a little segment. So we're going to play around with it. So let me know what you think about that. Haisha has our last question here. How are the koalas? They aren't on the news now that the fires aren't big news.
Well, I think I have to refer back to a myth, because the fires were in Australia, but we were very worried about it in New Zealand, and we had smoke blown over from Australia to New Zealand, so we were definitely impacted by it. And now, because we've just been through winter, so potentially it could be starting up again. You know, hopefully not. You know, kind of over November, December, January, February was when it was bad last year.
Yeah. Yeah, people are digging the segment. That's awesome. All right, awesome, cool, Henri. Okay, I want to finish up, Bridget, just giving you the opportunity just to kind of close us with just a thought, maybe something that we're not talking about, maybe that we should be thinking about, or any kind of word that you want to leave us with today.
Oh, I don't know. I've shared quite a few thoughts already today. I suppose, yeah, just come back to that point that somebody mentioned in the quote in the chat, you know, about relationships. We've just won a major industry award, and that was due to the relationships that we have with our clients. You know, we wanted our clients to be successful in that award. So, you know, I wrote the applications for them. We got in there, we did it. They had trust in us. We had trust in them. And, you know, the rest of the industry saw that and said that was a really good thing. So it was great. That's
fantastic. Tell people what award it was that you won.
The Employee Mobility Institute. It was in the global leadership category, and we won Innovation of the Year for some of the work we did around COVID with Deloitte on their resettlement program and relocation program and supporting their employees.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's a great place to leave it. But if people want to get in touch with you, Bridget, how do they get in touch with you?
LinkedIn's probably the best way. I love LinkedIn. It's how I keep in touch with my people all over the world.
LinkedIn's the best.
It is.
Talk to my friends on LinkedIn. Awesome. Fantastic. People are very happy for you winning your Teamy Award as well. People were really excited about this. Thank you, everybody that chimed in here in the comments and the questions. The show is always so much better when you guys get active out there. Thank you so much. We have Ken Nickel Lane from Canada, immigration attorney and LinkedIn personality, coming on tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Can't wait to see everybody there. Bridget, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It was really fun. It was a great addition to my morning. Wonderful.
Lovely. Hey, it's a great way to start the day. Maybe we'll start doing a morning routine soon. Thank you so much, everybody. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening or rest of your day if you're in New Zealand. Take care.
Bye.